sound of the slap echoed across the weapon's qualification range like a gunshot. 83 pairs of eyes turned toward the small woman who had just hit the concrete floor. Her cheek burned red, the handprint already forming across pale skin that had seen too many years hidden in shadows. Her technician's cap tumbled away, rolling to a stop against an ammunition crate. Staff Sergeant Derek Grant stood over her, his hands still raised, palm open. 6'2" of muscle and ego, wrapped in an Army Ranger instructor's uniform. The morning sun caught the combat patch on his shoulder, the kind awarded for deployment, though rumors suggested his had been earned in the safest forward operating base in Afghanistan. His shadow fell across the woman at his feet. "I asked you one last time." His voice carried across the training yard, designed to humiliate, designed to break. "Give me the weapon." Catherine Morrison, 29 years old, 4 years working in the shadows of Fort Bragg's inter-service training complex, slowly pushed herself up from the ground. She said nothing, just quietly picked up her cap, dusted it off with deliberate care, and placed it back on her head. Her movements were measured, controlled, carrying a precision that seemed almost mechanical. 4 years of being invisible, 4 years of silence, 4 years of choosing peace over the violence that lived in her bones, like an old friend waiting to be remembered. "Can't even talk back?" Derek laughed, turning to the crowd of Rangers watching the scene unfold. "See this? This is why women don't belong here. Can't even inspect a rifle properly." Laughter rippled through the training yard. Not the full-throated kind, but the nervous laughter of young men desperate to belong, desperate to prove themselves by joining in the humiliation of someone smaller, weaker, someone who couldn't fight back. Catherine remained silent, but something in her stance made Master Sergeant Victor Kane, standing in the far corner, pause mid-step. He narrowed his gaze, studying the way she stood. Shoulders open, center of gravity low, hands relaxed at her sides, but ready. That posture spoke of training most people would never receive. Victor was 62 years old, his lined face marked by 38 years of service and secrets. Desert Storm, 1991, SEAL liaison officer. He'd extracted operators from places that didn't exist on official maps. He recognized what trained warriors look like when they tried to blend into ordinary spaces. And this woman, this supposedly ordinary maintenance technician, stood like someone who had learned to be still in ways that most people never would. The kind of stillness that came from understanding violence so deeply that you didn't need to announce it. Colonel James Hartwell emerged from the command building, conducting his routine inspection. He stopped when he saw the scene before him. At 64, his features revealed nothing, but his eyes, those gray eyes that had witnessed missions the world would never know about, locked onto Catherine with an intensity that spoke of recognition. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the morning air with the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in places that didn't exist on official maps. Derek spun around, his face still flushed with anger and something darker. "Sir, this technician is refusing to release weapons to my unit. She's delaying our entire training schedule." Hartwell looked at Catherine, then at the M4 carbine in her hands. For just a moment, something flickered across his expression. Knowledge, understanding, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the neutral mask of a commanding officer dealing with a routine matter. "Handle it, Staff Sergeant." Derek grinned, the expression predatory. "Yes, sir." As Hartwell walked away, his pace was measured, but he glanced back at Catherine for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. He'd been watching her for 4 years, protecting her cover, redirecting inquiries, ensuring that her file remained locked behind clearances that would stop casual curiosity dead in its tracks. But something had changed this morning. He could feel it in the air, like the static before a lightning strike. Catherine returned to her workstation without a word. Her movements remained measured and deliberate as she continued inspecting the rack of M4 carbines awaiting distribution. Her fingers moved across each weapon with a precision that seemed almost supernatural, checking chambers, testing trigger assemblies, examining firing pins under the harsh fluorescent lights of the armory alcove. Each inspection took exactly 47 seconds. Not 46, not 48, exactly 47. 8 seconds for the chamber. Visual, tactile, and olfactory assessment. Checking for carbon buildup, stress fractures, improper cleaning solvents. 12 seconds for the bolt carrier group. Extractor claw wear, gas key security, metal fatigue indicators. 15 seconds for the trigger assembly, measuring creep with her fingertip, testing for overtravel, ensuring sear engagement stayed within spec. A trigger breaking at 4.5 pounds instead of 4 could mean the difference between a controlled shot and negligent discharge. 7 seconds for the magazine well, feed lip geometry, cartridge presentation angle, deformation checks. 5 seconds for function check, charging handle, bolt lock, magazine release. This wasn't maintenance, this was love. The kind of attention to detail that only came from understanding that every weapon she touched might be the only thing standing between a soldier and death when the moment came. Sergeant Riley Chen materialized at the adjacent supply station, her red hair catching the morning light. She'd been watching the confrontation with growing concern, her hands gripping a clipboard like it might anchor her to something solid. Riley had been in the Army long enough to recognize a difference between someone who was beaten and someone who was choosing not to fight. She'd seen it before in soldiers who'd come back from places they couldn't talk about, doing jobs they'd never acknowledge. The way they moved, the way they watched, the way they calculated angles and exits, even while standing still. She approached Catherine as the confrontation temporarily dispersed, the crowd moving toward the shooting lanes for the morning's first qualification round. "Hey, you okay?" Catherine looked up. For just a moment, something human flickered behind her guarded expression. Recognition of kindness in a place that had offered precious little. "I'm fine, Sergeant Chen." "Riley, we've been over this." She leaned against the workbench, keeping her voice low, creating a bubble of privacy in the public space. "You should report him. That was assault, clear as day." "He's got connections." Catherine resumed her inspection of the weapon rack, her movements never faltering. "Friends in high places. I've seen his type before. They always have protection." Riley studied her colleague's profile, noting the faint scar that traced along her jawline. The kind of scar that didn't come from kitchen accidents or automotive mishaps. The kind that came from violence, survived and healed. She noted the calluses on Catherine's hands, too thick for someone who just cleaned weapons. The way she constantly scanned the environment even while working, tracking movement, assessing threats, maintaining awareness. "Where'd you serve?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Catherine was quiet for a beat too long. "I'm just a technician. Started 4 years ago. Nothing special." But Riley had been a supply NCO for 12 years. She knew how to read people, how to spot the things they tried to hide. And everything about Catherine Morrison screamed that nothing special was the biggest lie she'd ever heard. The morning progressed with the grinding efficiency of military routine. Trainees cycled through the qualification lanes in groups of 8, their rifle reports creating a staccato rhythm that echoed off the concrete barriers. Derek prowled the firing line like a predator, his voice a constant bark of criticism and condescension, finding fault, demanding perfection, using his authority like a blunt instrument. Catherine worked in the background, invisible to most, essential to all. She cleared jammed weapons, replaced worn components, ensured that every trainee who stepped up to the line had a functioning rifle in their hands. Her movements were efficient, almost choreographed, each motion flowing into the next with a precision that seemed unconscious. The product of repetition burned so deep it had become instinct. Corporal Tyler Brooks stood at lane 7, his hands trembling so badly that the M4 shook in his grip. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning's relative cool, and his breathing came in short, sharp gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion. 20 years old and already carrying ghosts. His expression held the distant stare of someone who'd seen things that didn't fit in the neat boxes the civilian world demanded. Catherine noticed. Of course she noticed. She set down the rifle she was cleaning and made her way to his station. Her approach was so quiet that he didn't hear her until she spoke. "Square your shoulders." Tyler flinched, nearly dropping his weapon. His finger went dangerously close to the trigger, muscle memory from some other place, some other time trying to take over. "Easy." Her voice was low, meant only for him. Gentle, without being condescending. "Keep your finger indexed along the receiver. Good. Now take a breath. Hold it. Let half out." His breathing steadied almost against his will. The trembling in his hands decreased by measurable degrees. "The target isn't the enemy." She adjusted his elbow position with a gentle touch, the kind of correction that came from understanding, not judgment. "It's just a piece of paper. Paper can't hurt you." "How did you—" He couldn't finish the question, couldn't articulate the confusion, the relief, the sudden understanding that someone else knew, someone else understood. "I've seen that look before." She stepped back, giving him space, giving him dignity. "You're not alone, Corporal, and it doesn't make you weak." Before he could respond, Derek's voice cut across the range like a blade. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Catherine turned to face him, her expression neutral, professional, giving him nothing to grasp, nothing to use against her. His sight alignment was off. "His sight alignment is my concern." Derek stepped into her personal space, using his height to intimidate, his physical presence as a weapon. "You touch one of my trainees again, and I'll have you scrubbing latrines for a month." He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Matter of fact, I think you owe Private Reed over there an apology. He's been waiting 15 minutes for his weapon because you're too busy playing instructor." Private First Class Austin Reed appeared at Derek's shoulder, a smirk spreading across his young face. 22 years old, barely out of basic training, desperate to prove himself by being cruel to someone who couldn't fight back. Maybe she needs a reminder of where she belongs. He shoved a cart of empty magazines toward Catherine with enough force to send it careening into her hip. The impact was deliberate, calculated. Not enough to cause serious injury, but enough to hurt. Enough to humiliate. She stumbled, but didn't fall. Her foot slid back in a lateral pivot, her weight redistributing with fluid grace. Her balance recovered in a fraction of a second. The movement was so smooth, it seemed almost rehearsed, almost like something drilled into muscle memory through countless repetitions. Victor Kane saw it from 30 yards away. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. That wasn't a stumble recovery. That was a trained response. Lateral pivot, weight redistribution, balance regained before conscious thought could process the threat. He'd seen that exact movement in one place. Coronado, 1992. The SEAL training facility where they turned ordinary men into warriors who operated in the dark spaces of the world. His earlier suspicion crystallized into certainty. "Oops." Austin laughed, not even bothering to pretend it was an accident. His expression gleamed with the cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Catherine said nothing. She simply righted the cart and began organizing the scattered magazines with methodical precision. Each magazine placed with exact spacing, each movement controlled, each breath measured. Derek wasn't finished. The morning's humiliation had only whetted his appetite for dominance, for proving that the natural order of things remained intact despite this woman's unsettling competence. "You know what?" His voice carried across the training yard, pitched to be heard by the growing crowd. "I think we need to settle something here. There's been some confusion about who knows weapons and who just cleans them." He turned to address the assembled personnel, sensing drama, sensing blood in the water. "Disassembly competition. Right now, Specialist Webb versus our maintenance expert here. Let's see who really knows their business." Specialist Elliot Webb stepped forward, a confident smile on his face. 25 years old, certified armorer with 4 years of experience and an expert rating in 3 weapon platforms. This would be easy. This would be instructive. This would put the cleaning lady back in her place. I'm game if she is. Webb cracked his knuckles theatrically. Though I feel like I should warn her, I hold the base record, 43 seconds. Murmurs rippled through the assembled personnel. 43 seconds was impressive, professional level, the kind of speed that came from thousands of repetitions and genuine expertise. Catherine didn't move from her station, didn't acknowledge the challenge, didn't give Derek the satisfaction of a response. "What's wrong?" Derek's voice carried mockery like a weapon, sharp and designed to wound. "Scared? Or did you finally realize you're out of your depth?" "I have work to do, Staff Sergeant." Catherine's voice remained level, professional. "These weapons need to be ready for the afternoon qualification. Work can wait. This is about respect, about knowing your place." Derek stepped closer, using his size to intimidate, his presence as a physical threat. "Unless you want me to tell Colonel Hartwell that you're refusing a direct order." It wasn't a direct order. Everyone knew it. But the power dynamic was clear, the threat implicit. Refuse and face consequences. Comply and face humiliation. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Catherine set down her tools with careful precision, each implement placed exactly where it belonged. Then she looked up at Derek, and for just a moment, something flickered in her expression. Something that made Victor Kane, watching from across the yard, straighten to attention. "Fine." A space was cleared in the center of the training yard. 2 M4 carbines were placed on a table, identical in every way. Standard military issue, the kind of weapon every soldier in the facility could disassemble in their sleep. Webb took his position with the swagger of a man who'd already won, who knew exactly how this would play out. 4 years of daily practice against a cleaning woman who probably barely knew which end the bullets came out of. Catherine stood opposite, her expression blank, her stance relaxed, her breathing steady, waiting. "Standard disassembly and reassembly," Derek announced, loving every moment of this. "First one to present a function-checked weapon wins. Ready?" Webb nodded, rolling his shoulders, preparing for performance. Catherine said nothing, just waited, patient, still. "Go!" Webb's hands moved with practiced efficiency, the movements of a man who'd performed this task thousands of times. Takedown pins rotated and extracted with the smooth confidence of muscle memory. Bolt carrier group slid free, the metallic sound of steel on aluminum ringing across the suddenly quiet yard. Upper and lower receivers separated, buffer spring compressed and removed. Firing pin retaining pin extracted with thumbnail precision. His fingers flew through the sequence. Forward assist removed. Ejection port cover pivoted free. Gas tube separated from the upper receiver. Each component placed in order, ready for the reverse sequence. Reassembly was equally practiced. Gas tube aligned and secured. Ejection port cover snapped back. Forward assist pressed home with a satisfying click. Buffer and spring compressed into the lower receiver with exactly the right amount of force. Bolt carrier group inserted, lugs rotating into battery. Upper and lower receivers mated and secured with takedown pins. 47 seconds. He slapped the charging handle, pointed the weapon at the ground, pulled the trigger. Click. Function check complete. Done. He looked up, triumph on his face. Then he saw where everyone else was looking. Catherine stood motionless, her weapon already reassembled, already function checked, resting on the table in front of her. Her breathing was slow and even. Her hands were empty, resting at her sides with a kind of relaxed readiness that spoke of absolute confidence. But her eyes were open. She'd completed the entire sequence with full visual confirmation. No theatrics, just overwhelming speed and precision. Time? someone asked, the word barely more than a whisper. Victor checked his watch, though he'd been counting in his head. Old habits from desert operations, where timing meant the difference between extraction and capture. 16.8 seconds. The silence was absolute. Not the silence of shock this time, the silence of witnessing something impossible become real. The silence of understanding that the natural order of the world had just been fundamentally challenged. That's impossible, Webb breathed, his face gone pale. No one can. I've seen SEAL armorers who can't. He stopped, realizing what he just said, realizing the implication. 16 seconds, someone whispered from the crowd. She disassembled and reassembled a weapon system with 43 moving parts in 16 seconds. That's faster than anyone I've ever seen. Warrant Officer Jasper Reed pushed through the assembled soldiers, his weathered face intent. 44 years old, helicopter pilot, 8 years flying extract missions for Tier 1 operators. He'd watched the best warriors in the world work. He knew what elite looked like when it was stripped of rank and ceremony. His gaze locked on Catherine with an intensity that made nearby soldiers step aside. What's your call sign? The question cut through the silence like a blade. Not, what's your name? Or where'd you learn that? Call sign. The question you asked operators, not maintenance techs. The question that acknowledged you knew exactly what you were looking at. Catherine met his stare without flinching. I'm just a maintenance technician, sir. I've flown extract missions for Tier 1 operators for 8 years. Reed stepped closer, his voice dropping but somehow carrying further in the absolute silence. I know what BUD/S graduates look like when they handle weapons. I know how they move, how they think, how they exist in the world. He paused, studying her face, searching for confirmation of what he already knew. That level of proficiency, that speed without sacrificing precision, there's only one place that produces operators like that. I don't have a call sign. The lie was smooth, practiced, utterly unconvincing to anyone who knew what to look for. Victor pulled Command Sergeant Major Elijah Grant aside, speaking in urgent whispers that carried more weight than shouting ever could. That disassembly time, that level of proficiency, 16 seconds with 0 errors. Victor's voice was tight with certainty. There's only one place that produces operators like that. Grant finished the thought. You think she's a SEAL? I think she's something. Victor looked across the yard to where Colonel Hartwell stood watching, his face betraying nothing. And I think whatever it is, it's classified above our pay grade. He knows. Victor's voice was flat with certainty. Look at him. Hartwell knows exactly who she is, has known for 4 years. That's why her file is locked. That's why she's been invisible. Then why isn't he saying anything? That, Grant said slowly, is the interesting question. Derek wasn't finished. The humiliation of watching a cleaning lady outperform his hand-picked armorer demanded retribution, demanded some way to restore the natural order of things, to prove that this was a fluke, an anomaly, something that could be explained away and forgotten. He snatched an M9 Beretta from the nearest rack, ejected the magazine with unnecessary force, cleared the chamber with the violent efficiency of someone trying to reassert dominance through aggressive action. Anybody can play with parts when you've memorized the movements. Let's see if you can actually shoot. He thrust the weapon toward Catherine, his expression savage with the need to reassert dominance. Firing range, 50 yards, standard qualification course. Staff Sergeant, Captain Hugo Brennan began, the training officer finally sensing that this had gone too far, that lines were being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed, that what started as harassment had evolved into something that could end careers. What? She's already proved she thinks she's better than everyone. Let's give her a chance to prove it. Derek's smile was cruel, predatory. Unless she wants to admit she's just a parts monkey who got lucky. Catherine looked at the Beretta in his outstretched hand. For a long moment she didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there weighing something that only she could see, calculating odds and outcomes in ways that the crowd couldn't understand. "I'm not qualified for weapons discharge on this facility," she said finally, her voice carrying a careful neutrality. "I'll qualify you." Derek shoved the weapon into her hands. "Right now, move." The crowd followed, sensing drama, sensing something building toward a conclusion they couldn't quite predict. By the time they reached the pistol range, nearly 60 people had gathered, words spreading through the base like wildfire. "Something's happening. Something big." The maintenance tech just disassembled a rifle in 16 seconds, and now she's being forced to shoot. Derek loaded a fresh magazine, handed it to Catherine with exaggerated care. 15 rounds of 124-grain full metal jacket ammunition. Standard military issue. Nothing special about the weapon or the ammunition. Just basic equipment that any soldier could use. 15 rounds, 50 yards. Let's see what you've got. Catherine approached the firing line with measured steps. She loaded the magazine, 15 rounds chambered with a press check that made Victor's eyes narrow further. That was operator habit. Confirmation of a round in the chamber by feel, not sight. The kind of tactical efficiency that separated professionals from amateurs. Her stance was modified Weaver, slight forward cant, isometric tension between pushing and pulling hands, creating the kind of stable platform that allowed for precise shot placement. Textbook perfect except for one thing. Her right hand trembled slightly, a barely perceptible vibration that anyone looking closely could see. The kind of shake that suggested nerves, uncertainty, the natural response of someone out of their depth. "What's the matter?" Austin called out, emboldened by Derek's presence, by the crowd's anticipation. "Scared of a little bang?" Catherine adjusted her grip, steadied her breathing, and fired. The first round hit 6 inches left of the target. The second went high by 4 inches. The third clipped the edge of the paper. By the fifth shot, her grouping was scattered across a 2-foot radius. Not a single round touching center mass. Complete failure by any standard of marksmanship. Laughter erupted from the crowd, relieved laughter. The natural order restored. The cleaning lady put back in her place. The universe made sense again. "This is priceless," Webb crowed, his earlier humiliation forgotten in the joy of someone else's failure. "Fastest disassembly I've ever seen, and she can't hit the broadside of a building." "Technician accuracy," Derek smirked, satisfaction radiating from him like heat. "All theory, no practice. Maybe stick to what you know, sweetheart. Should have stayed in the kitchen where you belong." Austin was practically dancing with glee. But Victor Kane wasn't laughing. His gaze had moved past the 50-yard target to the 100-yard marker at the far end of the range. His coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud that went unnoticed in the general mockery. He sat down hard on a nearby bench, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. "Holy God," he breathed. Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Osborne followed his stare and went pale. 58 years old, Marine Scout sniper instructor, Desert Storm veteran with more confirmed kills than he'd ever acknowledge. 30 years of training the best shooters the Marine Corps could produce. He knew precision when he saw it. He knew the difference between luck and skill, between amateur and master. And what he was looking at made his breath catch. He walked slowly to the 100-yard marker, his boots heavy on the gravel. The crowd's laughter began to die as people noticed his movement, noticed the way he'd stopped and stared, noticed the expression on his craggy face, the expression that said he just witnessed something that shouldn't be possible. Osborne stood there for a long moment, studying the target with the professional attention of someone who'd spent 3 decades teaching marksmanship. Then he turned back to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the range with the weight of professional acknowledgement. 5 rounds, 100 yards, Pentagon grouping. He paused, letting that sink in, letting everyone understand what they were really looking at, letting the implications settle over the crowd like a revelation. With iron sights, on a pistol designed for 25-yard maximum effective range. Another pause, longer this time, letting the technical impossibility of what he was describing become clear to everyone present. The M9 Beretta has an effective range of 50 meters, 60 yards. She just achieved a precision grouping at 100 yards, nearly double the weapon's design capability. His voice took on the tone of someone bearing witness to something extraordinary. I've trained Marine Scout snipers for 30 years. What she just did, deliberately missing close targets while hitting distant ones with precision most people can't achieve with a rifle, that's not marksmanship, that's artistry. The silence that followed was different from before. Not shock, not embarrassment, something deeper. The silence of watching reality reorganize itself, of understanding that everything you thought you knew was wrong. The silence of witnessing mastery disguised as incompetence. She missed, Derek insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. The certainty was crumbling, replaced by something that looked like fear. She clearly missed the target right in front of her. She hit exactly what she was aiming at. Victor stepped forward, positioning himself between Derek and Catherine. His 62 years of experience suddenly carrying an authority that rank alone couldn't convey. The question is why she bothered to make it look like she missed it first. Catherine ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed the action 10,000 times, set the weapon down on the bench with careful precision. Her face revealed nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. I'm done here. She turned to walk back to her station. I have work to do. Hold on. Colonel James Hartwell descended from the observation platform, his stride purposeful, commanding. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. 64 years of command presence made manifest. The kind of authority that came from decades of leading soldiers in places where leadership meant the difference between mission success and body bags. Technician Morrison, a word. Catherine stopped, stood at attention, waited. That was quite a demonstration. Hartwell's voice was measured, careful, each word chosen with precision. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Practice, sir. Lots of practice. Practice. Hartwell let the word hang in the air, testing its weight, finding it insufficient. He turned to where Francis Webb, the civilian contractor working on base IT systems, worked at a laptop nearby. Webb, any progress on that file? The contractor looked up, his expression troubled, more than troubled, disturbed. The kind of look that came from encountering security protocols that shouldn't exist. Sir, I've hit a wall. Her file isn't just locked, it's flagged. Any deeper access attempts trigger an automatic notification to... He trailed off, swallowing hard. Sir, I'm not even authorized to know who gets notified. I've never seen security protocols like this, not even for special operations personnel. Hartwell nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. As if pieces of a puzzle he'd been working on for 4 years had finally clicked into place. Very well. Carry on, technician. As Catherine walked away, Hartwell caught Victor's attention and gave an almost imperceptible nod. A silent communication between men who'd spent lifetimes learning to speak without words. Men who understood that some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. Something was happening here. Something that went far beyond a simple personality conflict. Something that had been building for 4 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to emerge. And whatever it was about to blow wide open. The afternoon sun had begun its descent when Derek cornered Catherine at her workstation. Most personnel had moved to the mess hall for lunch, leaving the armory area relatively deserted. Just a handful of witnesses remained, enough to make what happened next a matter of record, but few enough to embolden a man desperate to restore his shattered pride. You think you're clever, don't you? His voice was low, venomous, the quiet fury of someone who'd lost everything and needed someone to blame, making me look bad in front of everyone. Catherine didn't look up from her work. Her hands continued their methodical inspection of firing pins, each movement precise and controlled. I was just defending myself, Staff Sergeant. You were showing off, playing games. He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, the sweat of exertion and fear. But here's the thing about games. I always win. I'm not playing any games.
Then what are you playing at?
His hand shot out, grabbing the front of her uniform, bunching the fabric in his fist. Who are you really? Where did you learn to shoot like that? Why is your file locked behind clearances I can't access? Let go of me. Catherine's voice remained level, but something had changed. A hardness entering her tone that hadn't been there before. A warning that most people would have recognized as dangerous. Derek Grant was not most people. He was a man whose ego had been shattered in front of 83 witnesses, whose authority had been undermined by someone he dismissed as beneath him, whose entire identity had been called into question by a cleaning lady with a pistol. Not until you answer my questions. His grip tightened, pulling her slightly off balance. Austin Reed appeared at his shoulder, despite the bruises forming on his face from an earlier scuffle. Despite the humiliation of being pushed aside, he was still loyal to the man who'd given him purpose and direction. Maybe she needs more direct instructions, Sarge. Austin's voice carried a mocking edge, but beneath it lay something darker, something that made the few remaining witnesses shift uncomfortably. Corrective training, private session, after hours. The implication hung in the air like poison. Every witness understood what he meant. The threat of sexual assault barely veiled behind military terminology, the kind of threat that should never be spoken, let alone carried out. Derek's smile was cruel. That's not a bad idea, Private. Maybe a reminder of her place would help her understand the chain of command, help her remember that some people don't belong here. Remove your hand. Catherine's voice dropped to absolute zero. Now. Or what? You'll report me? Derek laughed, but it sounded hollow. To who? Everyone here knows you're nobody. You've got no rank, no authority, no protection. You're just a cleaning lady who got lucky with a rifle. He shoved her backward with enough force to send her stumbling. Her hip caught the edge of the workbench, and for a fraction of a second, she was off balance, vulnerable. Her shirt pulled tight across her shoulder. The aged fabric, stressed beyond its limit by 4 years of daily wear and the violence of the moment, began to give way. And with a sound like tearing paper, the seams split. Time stopped. Because there, exposed on her right shoulder, was a tattoo that every soldier in the United States military would recognize instantly. A golden eagle, wings spread wide in flight, clutching a trident in one talon and a flintlock pistol in the other, surrounded by an anchor, the symbol of naval heritage. The symbol of warriors who operated in darkness, whose missions were never acknowledged, whose very existence was often classified. And below it, in stark black letters that seemed to burn against her skin, Team 6. Beneath that, in smaller script, the only easy day was yesterday. The trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs. Not just any SEALs, but SEAL Team 6, DevGRU, the most elite special operations force in the world. The unit that didn't officially exist. The warriors who conducted missions that would never be acknowledged, in places that would never appear on maps, against enemies whose deaths would never be claimed. Austin made a sound like a dying animal, a whimper of recognition and sudden, absolute terror. Victor Kane's hand rose to his forehead in an automatic salute before his conscious mind even registered what he was seeing. Senior Chief. The words came out as a breath, as a prayer, as an acknowledgement of something sacred. Command Sergeant Major Elijah Grant, who had been walking past when the commotion began, stopped dead in his tracks. Color drained from his dark face as realization dawned like a terrible sunrise. My God, Operation Ghost Harbor. The name rippled through the remaining witnesses like an electric current. Operation Ghost Harbor, the classified mission that had been whispered about in intelligence circles for 4 years. The operation that was never officially confirmed, never officially denied. The ghost story that operators told in private when they thought no one else was listening. The mission that had gone catastrophically wrong in ways the public would never know. The mission that had resulted in casualties that would never be officially acknowledged. The mission that had produced heroes whose names would never be spoken. Colonel Hartwell emerged from his office at the sound of Victor's raised voice. He took in the scene with a single glance. Catherine's torn shirt, the exposed tattoo, the stunned faces, and something shifted in his bearing. An authority settled over him like a mantle, transforming him from base commander to something more. Something that spoke of classified briefings and operations that existed only in sealed files. Senior Chief Catherine Morrison, his voice carried across the training yard, commanding attention from every person within earshot. A voice that had ordered men into combat, that had delivered eulogies for fallen warriors, that had carried the weight of command through decades of classified operations. Call sign, Wraith, SEAL Team 6, DEVGRU. The words fell like hammer blows, each one striking with the weight of absolute truth. 9 combat deployments, 52 confirmed operations. Around them, soldiers were beginning to emerge from buildings, drawn by the commotion, by the sound of Hartwell's voice carrying across the base with unusual intensity. Within minutes, every person on the training complex would know, would hear, would understand. Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts, Navy Cross. Hartwell's voice resonated with the weight of history, of sacrifice, of service that most people couldn't imagine. Operation Ghost Harbor, Mosul, Iraq, March 15, 2019. The assembled crowd had swollen to over 70 now, more arriving every second, drawn by the magnetic pull of revelation, drawn by the understanding that something extraordinary was happening, that history was being made. She held a defensive position for 13 hours under continuous enemy fire. Collapsed lung, 3 fractured ribs, 2 bullet wounds, eliminated 23 hostile combatants, saved 17 American lives. Corporal Madison Reeves, a female trainee who'd been watching Catherine all morning with fascination, had tears streaming down her face. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "God, I knew she was something special." Corporal Tyler Brooks, the young soldier Catherine had helped that morning, was openly weeping. His hands shook, but not from fear this time, from overwhelming emotion, from the sudden understanding of who had helped him, who had seen his pain and recognized it. "She knew about my PTSD," he managed through tears. "She understood because she lived it, because she's been where I am and made it through." Hartwell continued, his voice cutting through the gathering crowd like a blade through water. "The only reason you haven't heard her name is because everything about that operation is classified above your clearance level, above my clearance level, above the clearance level of anyone on this base." He paused, letting that sink in, letting everyone understand the weight of what they were witnessing. Senior Chief Morrison is what we call a ghost, an asset whose very existence is compartmentalized beyond normal channels. A warrior who operates in the spaces where official records don't exist, where heroism can never be acknowledged, where sacrifice must remain silent. Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Osborne snapped to attention and rendered a parade ground perfect salute. His craggy face carried an expression of profound respect. "Senior Chief," his voice carried across the yard, and one by one, every soldier in sight followed suit. Trainees, instructors, officers, support staff. They rose to their feet and saluted the small woman standing alone by the workbench, her torn shirt exposing the symbol of her silent sacrifice. Captain Hugo Brennan stepped forward, his face gray with shame. The training officer who had dismissed her with a glance now stood at rigid attention, saluting with a precision that suggested desperation. "Senior Chief, I owe you an apology." His voice cracked, the professional veneers shattering. "I failed in my duty as an officer. I prioritized convenience over justice. I allowed harassment to continue unchecked. There is no excuse for my failure." Catherine returned the salute with military precision. Her face still revealed nothing, but Victor thought he saw something flicker across her features. Not satisfaction, not vindication, something softer, something that looked like relief. "There's no need for apologies, Captain," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. "But there is need for change." Brennan nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Senior Chief, there is, and that change starts now." Specialist Elliot Webb had fallen to his knees in the sand, his face cycling through emotions like a traffic light. "I challenged a SEAL to a disassembly competition," he said to no one in particular, his voice hollow with shock. "I challenged a DevGru operator. I am the stupidest person alive." Riley Chen pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. When she reached Catherine, she didn't salute, didn't stand at attention. She just wrapped her arms around the smaller woman and held on. "I knew," Riley whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "God help me. I knew there was something special about you. I just didn't know how special." Catherine returned the embrace, and for the first time since the confrontation began, her composure cracked slightly. Not breaking, but bending, showing the human being beneath the warrior's mask. "You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, Riley. When everyone else saw just a technician, you saw a person. That means more than you know." Austin Reed sat in the sand where he'd fallen, rocking slightly, his face blank with shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I didn't know." Tears began streaming down his face, the reality of what he'd done crashing over him like a wave. "I swear to God, I didn't know who she was." He couldn't finish. The weight of his actions, the magnitude of his mistakes, the understanding of how close he'd come to something unforgivable, it was all too much. And Derek Grant stood where he had been standing when he grabbed Catherine's shirt. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His hand was still extended, frozen in the moment of his final mistake. His face had gone the color of old ash, and his stare held the 1,000-yard look of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. Hartwell approached him slowly, deliberately, each step measured and final. "Staff Sergeant Grant." The colonel's voice was soft, but it carried. Everyone heard, everyone would remember. "You just assaulted a decorated Special Operations veteran, a Bronze Star recipient, a Purple Heart holder 3 times over, a Navy Cross recipient." Derek's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His hand began to tremble. "You questioned her competence, her knowledge, her right to be here." Hartwell stepped closer until he was inches from Derek's face. "You had the audacity, the sheer arrogance, to tell a woman who has eliminated more enemy combatants than you've ever seen in photographs to stay in her lane. You threatened her with sexual assault." A sound escaped Derek's throat. It might have been a whimper. It might have been the last gasp of dying pride. "Consider your career over." Hartwell turned away, the gesture itself a form of dismissal. "MPS, please escort Staff Sergeant Grant to the detention facility pending court-martial proceedings. Charges to include assault, threatening a superior NCO, conduct unbecoming, and conspiracy to commit sexual assault." 2 military police officers materialized from the crowd, their faces carefully neutral as they took positions on either side of the stunned man. Derek's legs seemed to fail him, and the MPS had to support most of his weight as they led him away. His feet dragged in the sand, leaving twin trails behind him like the wake of something sinking. Austin was next. The young soldier was still sitting when the MPs approached, his face streaked with tears, his body shaking with the enormity of understanding. Private First Class Reed, you are under arrest for assault on a senior NCO, conspiracy to commit assault, and threatening a superior officer. I didn't know. The words tumbled out in a panicked rush, desperate and broken. I didn't know who she was. I swear I didn't know. That, Catherine said quietly, her voice cutting through Austin's panic with surgical precision, is precisely the problem. Everyone turned to look at her. The small woman with the torn shirt and the revealed tattoo, and the bearing of someone who'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody. She looked at Austin, then at the gathered soldiers, her voice calm, measured but carrying to every corner of the silent yard. Because you thought I was beneath you. She paused, letting the words sink in, letting everyone feel their weight. Your behavior was the problem, and it would have been just as wrong if I actually was just a maintenance technician. If I had no combat experience, no decorations, no SEAL trident. The rank you wear, the job you do, the awards on your chest, none of that determines whether you deserve basic human dignity. The assembled personnel went absolutely still. Some fundamental truth had just been spoken, and everyone present understood its importance in ways they couldn't quite articulate. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's rank or status. Catherine's gaze swept across the crowd, meeting eyes, holding them. Every person on this base, every technician, every cook, every clerk, they all volunteered to serve their country. They all swore the same oath. They all deserve dignity and respect. Madison Reeves wiped her face and nodded, standing straighter, understanding something fundamental about service, about respect, about what it meant to wear the uniform. Tyler Brooks straightened his shoulders, his hands steady for the first time all day, understanding that weakness wasn't something to hide, but something to acknowledge and overcome. Riley Chen stood beside Catherine, her chin raised, her posture proud, understanding that kindness wasn't weakness, and that seeing people for who they really were was the most important skill anyone could possess. As the MPS led Austin away, the young man looked back one last time. His face was a mask of grief and understanding, of someone who'd learned the hardest lesson of his life and would carry it forever. The training yard slowly emptied as personnel returned to their duties, their worldviews fundamentally altered. Conversations would happen in barracks that night. Questions would be asked. Stories would be shared, and everyone who'd witnessed what happened would carry it with them as a reminder that the people we dismiss, the ones we overlook, the ones we think don't matter, they might be the most important people of all. Catherine returned to her workstation as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. The weapons still needed maintenance. The trainees still needed equipment. Her job, whatever name it carried in the personnel database, hadn't changed. But everything else had. The torn shirt hung awkwardly on her shoulder, the tattoo still visible to anyone who looked. She made no effort to cover it. The secret was out. The ghost had been revealed. 4 years of invisibility ended by a single moment of violence from a man who couldn't accept being wrong. And as the day faded into evening, as the base settled into its nighttime routine, Victor Kane found her there, still working, still methodical, still the same person she'd been that morning, except now everyone knew what he'd suspected all along. Senior Chief. He stood at a respectful distance, his lined face carrying an expression of profound respect. Permission to speak freely. Granted, Master Sergeant. I served as SEAL liaison during Desert Storm, Coronado, 91 and 92. I thought I'd seen everything they could do, every level of excellence they could achieve. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What you did today, you weren't fighting them, you were teaching them. Every move you made was designed to control without injuring, to dominate without destroying. That's not combat technique, that's philosophy made manifest. Catherine set down the rifle she'd been inspecting, meeting his gaze across the fading light. They weren't enemies, Master Sergeant. They were just fools. And fools deserve education, not elimination. Victor smiled, the expression transforming his lined face into something almost paternal. Your father would be proud. Something flickered across Catherine's expression. Pain, memory, loss, all compressed into a single moment of vulnerability. You knew my father? Brigadier General Thomas Morrison, Cold War Operations, classified missions in Eastern Europe, 85 to 87. He taught me that real warriors don't just win battles, they win hearts and minds. They serve something bigger than themselves. Catherine's hands had stopped moving, her attention completely focused on the older man before her. He died when I was 7. Classified mission. They never told us where or how, just that he was a hero. He was. Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping to something private, something meant only for her. And so are you. What you did today, showing restraint when you could have destroyed them, teaching when you could have punished, that's the legacy he left you. That's what makes you more than just an operator. They stood together in the gathering darkness, 2 warriors separated by decades, but united by understanding. By the knowledge that real strength wasn't about what you could do to others, but what you chose not to do. Colonel Hartwell is going to offer you an instructor position, Victor said finally. When he does, take it. These kids need to see what you represent. They need teachers who've been through the fire and chosen to serve anyway. I'll think about it, Master Sergeant. That's all I ask. As Victor walked away, Catherine pulled out something from her pocket. A challenge coin that Colonel Hartwell had given her earlier before everything changed. She hadn't really examined it in the chaos of the day, but now, turning it over in her fingers, she noticed something for the first time. On the reverse side, almost hidden in the intricate design, was a name. Marcus Webb, Falcon, her spotter, her teammate, her friend. The man who had covered her retreat in Mosul, who had drawn fire while she evacuated the wounded, who had fallen in a hail of bullets she'd been unable to prevent. The man she'd carried in her heart like a stone for 4 years. A weight that never lessened. A guilt that never eased. Hartwell had known, maybe not everything, but enough to give her this coin. Enough to let her find her own way to this moment. Enough to trust that when the time came, she would make the right choice. Catherine looked across the base at the training yards where everything had changed, at the buildings full of soldiers who now knew her secret, at the sky darkening with the promise of night. 4 years ago, she had walked away from the life of a warrior, broken in body and spirit, carrying the weight of everyone she couldn't save, everyone she'd left behind. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey back. But tonight, she simply stood in the darkness, holding the coin that carried her lost friend's name, and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but hope nonetheless. Because sometimes the dead didn't stay dead. Sometimes ghosts could come back. And sometimes the missions you thought were finished were just beginning. The easy days were over. They always had been. But real warriors didn't need easy. They just needed purpose. And Catherine Morrison had just found hers again. The secure phone in Colonel Hartwell's office had been ringing for 30 minutes. The red light blinked with mechanical persistence, each pulse a demand for attention that couldn't be ignored. Level 7 encryption, the kind of security classification that existed in a realm beyond normal military operations, in spaces where decisions were made that would never appear in official records. Hartwell stood at his window, watching the last light fade from the training yard where Catherine Morrison's secret had been laid bare just hours ago. His hand rested on the glass, fingers splayed against the cool surface, as if he could somehow touch the weight of what was coming. He'd known this moment would arrive eventually, had known it from the day Catherine first appeared at Fort Bragg 4 years ago, carrying wounds that went deeper than flesh, seeking refuge in the kind of invisibility that only the truly broken understood. He'd protected her, covered for her, redirected inquiries, ensured that her file remained locked behind clearances that would stop casual curiosity dead in its tracks. But the phone kept ringing, and some calls couldn't be ignored forever. "Sir," the voice came from behind him. Catherine stood in the doorway, her torn uniform replaced by fresh fatigues, the sealed trident now visible on her shoulder like a declaration. "You wanted to see me." Hartwell turned from the window, his gray eyes carrying the weight of 6 decades of secrets. "That phone has been ringing since the moment your tattoo was exposed. Level 7 encryption. I've only seen that twice before in my career." He paused, letting the implications settle between them. Both times it concerned operations that officially don't exist. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even resignation. "Answer it," Hartwell said quietly. "I'll give you privacy." "Sir, whatever this is about," Senior Chief. His voice carried the gentle firmness of a man who'd given orders in places where hesitation meant death. "I suspect I already know what this is, and I suspect you need to hear it alone." He moved toward the door, pausing beside her. For just a moment, his hand rested on her shoulder, a gesture that transcended rank and protocol. "Thank you for today, for everything, for being exactly who you are when it would have been easier to be anyone else." Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like finality. Catherine stood alone in the office, staring at the blinking red light. 4 years. 4 years of peace, fragile and temporary, but peace nonetheless. 4 years of being nobody, of cleaning weapons and maintaining equipment and existing in spaces where the past couldn't find her. The light blinked, insistent, demanding. She picked up the receiver. "This is Morrison." The voice that answered was female, heavily modulated to the point of being mechanical. But something in the cadence was familiar, something that triggered memories she tried to bury. "Wraith, welcome back." 3 words, simple, direct, but they carried the weight of recognition, of shared history, of operations that existed only in sealed files and the nightmares of those who'd survived them. "Who is this?" "A friend, an old colleague. It doesn't matter." A pause, carefully calculated. "We've been watching your progress, the Wounded Warrior program, the maintenance work, the incident today." Catherine's grip tightened on the receiver. "You've been surveilling me?" "We've been protecting you. There's a difference. Ensuring that the people who wanted you dead didn't find you." "I don't. We have a mission, Wraith, one that requires your specific skill set, your particular history, your unique connection to an asset we've been tracking for 4 years. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. 4 years, the same amount of time Catherine had been hiding at Fort Bragg. The same amount of time she'd been carrying a weight she couldn't name. "I'm retired, medical discharge, even if it concerns Falcon?" The name hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The office around her seemed to tilt, reality shifting on an axis that had suddenly lost its center. Her free hand reached out, finding the edge of Hartwell's desk, gripping it hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Falcon is dead." The words came out rough, scraped raw by 4 years of grief. "KIA, Mosul. I saw him fall." "You saw him fall. You assumed the worst. Everyone did." The voice softened slightly, taking on an almost gentle quality. "But assumptions aren't facts, Wraith. And sometimes the dead don't stay buried." Catherine sank into Hartwell's chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Images flooded her mind, unbidden and overwhelming. The compound in Mosul. Smoke and fire and the sound of automatic weapons tearing the air apart. Marcus Webb's voice on the radio, steady even as everything collapsed around them. "Get them out, Wraith. That's an order. Easy days are over. Now go. She'd watched from the extraction point as the building came down, watched as fire and smoke swallowed everything, watched as the place where her spotter, her teammate, her friend had been making his last stand simply ceased to exist. They declared him killed in action. Body never recovered. Another ghost added to the long list of warriors who disappeared into the dark places of the world and never came home. That's impossible, she managed finally. We have satellite imagery, signal intercepts, human intelligence from assets on the ground. A pause, deliberate, letting tension build. Lieutenant Marcus Webb is alive, Wraith. Confirmed as of 72 hours ago. He's been held in a black site facility on the Syria-Iraq border for years. The room spun. Catherine's training kicked in automatically, forcing her to breathe, to center herself, to process information even as her emotional core threatened to fragment. Why are you telling me this? Because we're mounting a recovery operation, and we want you on the team. I haven't agreed to anything. 6 months ago, one of our assets managed to make brief contact with the prisoner. She had approximately 90 seconds before guards returned. The voice paused, letting the moment build. Webb gave her a message to deliver. He said, "Tell Wraith the easy days are over." The phrase hit her harder than the name had. Their code, the words they'd used during training, during deployments, during the moments when things got hard, and staying easy would have meant death. A signal between warriors who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something harder than the circumstances trying to kill you. He knew we'd come for him, Catherine whispered. He knew you'd come for him. You were his teammate, his friend, the person he trusted more than anyone else in the world. The voice took on an edge of urgency. He's been holding on to hope for 4 years because he believed in you. Catherine closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. 4 years of guilt. 4 years of carrying his death like a stone in her chest. 4 years of wondering if she could have done something different, made some other choice, found some way to bring him home. And now this. The possibility of redemption wrapped in mystery and delivered by a voice she didn't recognize, but somehow knew, was telling the truth. You could hear truth in certain silences, the spaces between words where lies couldn't hide. Brief me. Her voice was steady now, clear with purpose. I want to know everything. Welcome back, Wraith. Briefing is at 0500 tomorrow. Secure facility, off base. Transportation will pick you up at 0430. Understood. And Wraith, this operation doesn't exist. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming. No extraction. No acknowledgement that we were ever there. Black Ops. Catherine had run enough of them to know the drill. Plausible deniability. Need-to-know basis. Expendable assets pursuing objectives that couldn't be officially sanctioned. When has it ever been any different? The line went dead. Catherine sat in the darkness of Hartwell's office, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind a battlefield of warring emotions. Hope and fear. Purpose and doubt. The past she'd tried to escape, and the future rushing toward her like a freight train. Through the window, she could see the training yard where her secret had been exposed. Somewhere down there, Riley was probably starting her evening shift. Madison was probably reviewing the day's training. Tyler was probably fighting his demons with the courage of a soldier who refused to surrender. And Derek Grant was probably sitting in a cell, contemplating the ruins of his career, understanding perhaps, for the first time, that the woman he'd tried to break had been stronger than him all along. But Catherine's thoughts were elsewhere, on a man she thought dead, on a promise she thought broken, on a mission that would either bring him home or ensure she joined him in whatever dark place he'd been held for 4 years. She pulled out the challenge coin Hartwell had given her. In the dim light from the window, she could just make out the name engraved on the reverse side. Marcus Webb, Falcon. Hartwell had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to give her this coin months ago. Enough to prepare her for this moment, even if she hadn't understood what was coming. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in." Victor Kane entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee, steam rising in the cool evening air. "Figured you might need this." He set 1 cup on the desk, settling into the chair across from her with the comfortable ease of a man who'd earned the right to be informal with superior ranks. "How did you know I was here?" 62 years of learning to read situations. Victor took a sip of his coffee, his gray eyes studying her face. "And the fact that Colonel Hartwell just told me you'd be leaving soon, asked me to check in on you." Catherine wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. Grounding. Real. "They found him, Victor. They found Falcon." "I know. Hartwell told me that much." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something private. "I also know you're going after him, and I know that look in your eyes. I've seen it before in operators preparing for missions they might not come back from. He's alive. He's been waiting for 4 years. I can't. I'm not here to talk you out of it." Victor set down his cup with deliberate care. "I'm here to tell you something you need to hear before you go." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tactical compass. Worn. The kind that had seen decades of use and carried the weight of history in every scratch and dent. Desert Storm, 1991. I was 33 years old, attached to SEAL teams for reconnaissance operations. We got pinned down outside Basra, surrounded on 3 sides. Communications shot to hell. He turned the compass over in his weathered hands. "This compass got me through. Every time I thought we were lost, every time I was sure we'd never make it out, I'd check this bearing, and it never failed." He pressed it into Catherine's hand, closing her fingers around it. "It's guided me through 100 missions, Senior Chief. Brought me home every single time. Now I'm passing it to you." Catherine looked down at the compass, seeing the inscription etched into the back. "Always find your way home. Desert Storm, 91. "Victor, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will." His voice carried the absolute certainty of a man who'd seen too much to doubt his own judgment. "Bring it back. Bring yourself back. These kids need to see what you represent. They need teachers who've been through the fire and chosen to serve anyway." "What if I can't save him?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, his lined face thoughtful in the dim light. "I worked with your father, Brigadier General Thomas Morrison. Cold War operations, Eastern Europe, mid-80s. Classified missions that officially never happened." Catherine's breath caught. "You knew my father?" "I did. He was one of the finest officers I ever served with. Brilliant tactician, fearless leader." Victor leaned back, his gaze distant with memory. "But more than that, he understood something that most warriors never learn." "What's that?" "That success isn't measured in kills or medals or operations completed. It's measured in the people you bring home, the lives you save, the difference you make in a world that's mostly darkness." Victor leaned forward again, his voice taking on weight. "Your father died on a classified mission in 1987. You were 7 years old. What they didn't tell you, what they couldn't tell you because it was sealed, is that he died covering the retreat of 8 operators. He could have extracted. He had the window, but he stayed behind to make sure everyone else got out." Tears streamed down Catherine's face now, silent and unstoppable. "He made a choice that day to sacrifice himself so others could live. That's what warriors do, Catherine. We don't quit, even when the odds say we should. We don't abandon our people, even when staying means dying." He stood, moving toward the door, then paused. "You're his daughter in every way that matters. You have his courage, his skill, his understanding of what it means to serve. Whatever happens on this mission, whatever choices you have to make, trust that. Trust the legacy he gave you." "Thank you, Victor. Thank me by coming back, and when you do, We'll talk about that instructor position Hartwell's going to offer you. After he left, Catherine sat alone with her coffee and the compass and the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, the base had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Guard changes, patrol routes, the familiar sounds of a military installation preparing for sleep. But Catherine wouldn't sleep tonight. She had preparations to make, equipment to gather, a mission to plan, and a promise to keep. She rose from Hartwell's chair and made her way through the darkened corridors of the command building. Her footsteps echoed on the tile floors, each step carrying her further from the person she'd been that morning and closer to the warrior she'd tried to leave behind. Her quarters were small, Spartan, chosen specifically for their anonymity. A bunk, a locker, a small bathroom with water pressure that felt like luxury after 4 years of base housing. But hidden in the back of her closet, behind uniforms that smelled of gun oil and sweat, was something else. A go bag, black tactical pack, waterproof, reinforced, designed to carry everything an operator might need for a mission that existed in the space between official sanction and absolute deniability. She hadn't opened it in 4 years, hadn't needed to. The person who'd packed this bag, who'd prepared for contingencies and planned for worst-case scenarios, that person had died on a rooftop in Mosul with a bullet in her lung and the screams of dying men in her ears. Or so she'd thought. Catherine pulled the bag from its hiding place and set it on her bunk. The zipper still moved smoothly, well-maintained despite years of disuse. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Medical kit, combat-grade tourniquet, hemostatic agents, pressure bandages, the tools for keeping people alive when death was determined to claim them, emergency rations, MREs stripped of unnecessary packaging, compressed to minimum volume, capable of sustaining an operator for days in hostile territory, false identification, 3 different countries, 3 different names, 3 different lives that existed only on paper and in the databases of intelligence agencies that didn't officially exist. And at the bottom, wrapped in oiled cloth, her personal sidearm, a modified Glock 19 that had accompanied her on 9 deployments. Every mission, every operation where death was a possibility and survival was earned through skill and luck in equal measure. She unwrapped the weapon slowly, reverently. The metal was cool against her palms, familiar in ways that transcended conscious thought. This pistol had saved her life more times than she could count, had taken others when there was no choice left, had been the last line of defense between her team and oblivion on more occasions than she wanted to remember. Her fingers moved automatically, field stripping the weapon, checking each component with the methodical precision of someone for whom this ritual was as natural as breathing. Slide, barrel, recoil spring, frame, everything in perfect condition, maintained by instinct even during years of disuse. She reassembled the Glock, loaded 3 magazines with practiced efficiency, secured everything in the go bag according to a pattern burned into muscle memory through countless iterations. A knock at her door interrupted her preparations. "It's open." Riley Chen entered, her red hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. She carried a small bag, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Heard you're leaving. Word travels fast. It always does." Riley set the bag on the bunk beside Catherine. "I brought you something. Figured you might need it." Inside were sandwiches, energy bars, a thermos of coffee, simple things, practical things, the kind of care that spoke louder than grand gestures. "Thank you, Riley. I'm not going to ask where you're going or what you're doing." Riley sat on the edge of the bunk, her voice soft. "But I need to ask you something else." "Go ahead." "Why maintenance? After everything you'd done, all the places you'd been, all the people you'd saved, why come here and clean weapons?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. It deserved an honest answer. "My father wrote letters from his deployments. I found them after he died, tucked away in a box my mother kept. In one of them, he wrote, "True warriors serve in peace, not just war. The gun that never fires because it's properly maintained saves as many lives as the one that fires true when needed." She picked up one of Riley's sandwiches, not because she was hungry, but because the gesture felt right. I wanted to honor that, to serve without killing, to keep people safe not through violence, but through preparation. Every weapon I maintained, every rifle I checked, I knew I was protecting someone, maybe saving their life when the moment came that they needed their equipment to function perfectly. Riley wiped her eyes. That's beautiful and incredibly sad. Most true things are. They sat together in comfortable silence, two women from different worlds, connected by a simple act of human kindness that transcended rank and role and expectation. "When you come back," Riley said finally, "and you will come back, I want you to teach me. Whatever you know, however you became who you are, I want to learn." Catherine smiled, the expression carrying warmth that had been absent from her face for years. "I'd like that." After Riley left, Catherine continued her preparations. She checked her tactical gear, verified her equipment, ensured that every item in her go bag was positioned exactly where instinct would reach for it in moments of crisis. But her mind was elsewhere, on a compound in hostile territory, on a man who'd been waiting 4 years for rescue, on a mission that would either end in redemption or add one more ghost to the collection she already carried. At 0200, she made her way to the base chapel, small, non-denominational, designed to serve the spiritual needs of soldiers from every faith and background. It was empty at this hour, just rows of pews and an altar lit by a single candle. Catherine knelt in the front row, not because she was particularly religious, but because some rituals transcended belief, because warriors throughout history had sought solace in quiet places before walking into darkness, because prayer, whether to God or fate or the universe itself, was a way of acknowledging that some things were beyond human control. "I don't know if you're listening," she whispered to the empty space. "I don't know if my father is somewhere listening either. But if you are, if he is, I need you to know something." Her hands gripped the pew in front of her, knuckles white with tension. "I left Falcon behind once. I watched him fall and I couldn't save him. That failure has lived in my chest like a tumor for 4 years. It's colored everything, shaped every choice, defined who I became after Mosul." Tears fell freely now, splashing onto the worn wood. "Tomorrow I get a chance to make it right, to bring him home, to prove that leaving him wasn't the end, just a pause, a detour on a road that always led back to this moment." She wiped her face, steadied her breathing. "If I don't make it back, I want someone to know that I tried, that I didn't give up, that I honored the legacy my father left me by choosing service over safety, by picking people over self-preservation." The candle flickered, a draft, nothing more. But in that moment, it felt like acknowledgement, like something beyond herself was bearing witness to the vow she was making. She stood, feeling something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that whatever came next, she would face it with the full measure of her training, her experience, her will. At 0400, she made one final stop. The armory where her secret had been revealed, where everything had changed. The space was empty now, weapons secured for the night, workstations cleaned and organized for the next day's operations. She approached the maintenance bench where she'd spent 4 years of her life, ran her fingers across the surface, feeling the familiar texture of metal and oil and purpose. This place had been her sanctuary, her hiding spot, the space where she could serve without the weight of command decisions, where she could protect without the burden of leadership. But that chapter was closing. Whatever happened in the next 72 hours, she wouldn't be coming back to this bench as the person who'd left it. Either she'd return as Senior Chief Catherine Morrison, instructor and mentor, helping build the next generation of warriors, or she wouldn't return at all. In the corner, on a shelf she'd claimed as her own, sat a rifle. Not military issue, not part of the regular inventory. This was Marcus Webb's personal weapon, the one he'd carried on training exercises, the one she'd maintained religiously for 4 years as a memorial to a man she'd thought lost. She'd cleaned it weekly, checked every component, kept it in perfect condition, as if someday he might walk through the door and need it again. Now that seemed less like ritual and more like prophecy. Catherine picked up the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. She field-stripped it one last time, checking each part with the loving attention of someone preparing a sacred object. Then she reassembled it, loaded a magazine, and secured it in a carrying case. When Falcon came home, he'd come home to a weapon that had been waiting for him, that had been maintained with the kind of care that spoke louder than words, that proved someone had never stopped believing. At 04:15, Corporal Tyler Brooks found her there. The young soldier who'd been trembling on the firing line that morning, who'd been drowning in PTSD until Catherine had thrown him a lifeline disguised as shooting instruction. Senior Chief. He stood in the doorway, uncertain, his hands steadier than they'd been 12 hours ago, but still showing the faint tremor of someone fighting invisible demons. I heard you were leaving. Just for a little while, Corporal. I wanted to thank you, for today, for seeing me when everyone else just saw a problem. Catherine set down the rifle case and turned to face him fully, giving him the respect of her complete attention. You're not a problem, Tyler. You're a warrior dealing with wounds that most people never see. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. My father had the same tremors when he came back from Iraq. Second deployment, 2007. He never talked about it, never got help, just drank until the shaking stopped. Tyler's voice cracked. He killed himself when I was 16. I've been terrified I'd end up the same way. Your father did the best he could with what he knew, but you have something he didn't. What? People who understand, who've been where you are, who can help you find a path through the darkness. She moved closer, her voice dropping to something gentle. The trembling isn't weakness. It's your body remembering how to survive. The nightmares aren't failure. They're your mind processing trauma so you can move forward. All of it is proof that you're still fighting. And as long as you're fighting, you haven't lost. Tyler wiped his eyes. How do you cope? After everything you've seen, everything you've done, how do you keep going? I serve, even when I'm scared, even when it hurts, even when every instinct says to hide. Because the people I serve, the ones I protect, they're worth it. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You are worth it, Tyler. Your life matters. Your service matters. And when I get back, we're going to work together to make sure you have the tools you need to keep fighting. Not against enemies, but for yourself, for your future, for the person you're meant to become. Yes, Senior Chief. Thank you. After he left, Catherine stood alone in the armory one last time, memorizing the space, honoring what it had meant to her. Then she picked up Falcon's rifle case and her go bag and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting at the designated pickup point. The rear door opened from inside, a silent invitation. Catherine climbed in without hesitation, the door closing behind her with a solid thunk of armored plating. The vehicle accelerated into the night. Inside, 2 men occupied the front seats. Both wore civilian clothes, but their bearing marked them as operators. The way they sat, the way they scanned the environment even while driving, the way they existed in constant readiness. Neither introduced themselves. Neither seemed inclined to small talk. Catherine was fine with that. She had enough to think about without adding forced conversation to the mix. The drive took 40 minutes, winding through back roads and secure checkpoints until they reached an unremarkable building on the outskirts of Fort Bragg. Chain-link fence, concrete walls, a single guard station manned by soldiers who checked credentials with unusual thoroughness. Inside, the building transformed into something else entirely. State-of-the-art communications equipment lined the walls. Digital displays showed satellite imagery of terrain Catherine recognized immediately: the Syria-Iraq border, her old hunting ground, the place where she'd left pieces of herself that could never be recovered. 3 people waited in the briefing room. A man stood at the center, his back turned, studying a tactical display with focused intensity. Tall, athletic, close-cropped gray hair, the posture of someone accustomed to command. When he turned, Catherine saw eyes that had seen too much, served too much, carried too much. Eyes that recognized the same in others. Wraith, the man's voice carried authority without arrogance. "Thank you for coming. You can call me Shepard. It's not my name, but it'll do." Catherine shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip. The scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence survived. Commander Nathan Cross, former Delta Force, the kind of operator who'd spent decades in dark places, doing things that would never be acknowledged. "You're the one who called." "I am." Shepard gestured to the tactical display, where the compound layout was rendered in precise detail. "Let me introduce you to your team." 2 men stood near the communication station. Both carried themselves with the controlled readiness of operators who'd spent years in dark places. Both had eyes that tracked movement with unconscious precision. "This is Nomad," a man in his late 30s with a Scottish accent and features that suggested Highland ancestry, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Sean Mackenzie, former Delta Force, explosives specialist. If it needs to blow up, he's your man." Nomad nodded, his pale eyes assessing Catherine with professional interest. "Heard about you, Wraith. Desert Storm guys still tell stories. Don't believe everything you hear." "Wouldn't dream of it." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "And this is Echo." A man in his mid-30s with an Irish accent extended his hand. "Sergeant Patrick O'Connor, former DevGru, communications and infiltration specialist. Doors that don't want to open tend to change their minds around him." Catherine shook his hand, noting the way he moved. Economical, precise, the mark of someone who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. "Senior Chief, honor to work with you. 4 operators for a rescue operation in hostile territory." Catherine looked at Shepard, calculating odds and outcomes. Small team, minimal footprint, maximum deniability. Shepard's expression was neutral, professional. "This operation doesn't exist, Wraith. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming, no extraction, no acknowledgement that we were ever there. Black Ops, the blackest." She paused. "Which brings me to an important point. Why me? Why not someone on active duty?" Shepard pulled up a file on the display, Catherine's service record, or rather, the parts of it that existed beyond classified seals. "Because Falcon asked for you, specifically, by name." The words hit like a physical blow. Catherine's hands clenched at her sides, her breathing carefully controlled. "When?" 6 months ago. Our asset managed brief contact with the prisoner. She had approximately 90 seconds before guards returned. Shepard pulled up surveillance photos taken through a grimy window. Falcon's face, thinner, bearded, marked by captivity, but alive, undeniably alive. He gave her a message to deliver. He said, "Tell Wraith I'm still here. Tell her the easy days are over." Catherine closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. Their code, the phrase they'd used during training, during deployments, during the moments when things got hard and staying easy would have meant death. A signal between warriors who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something harder than the circumstances trying to kill you. "He knew we'd come for him," she whispered. "He knew you'd come for him." Shepard's voice softened slightly. "You were his teammate, his friend. He held on to hope because he believed in you." Catherine opened her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was steady as steel. "Brief me on the compound layout, guard rotations, entry and exit points. I want to know everything." Shepard smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something almost warm. Welcome back, Wraith. The briefing lasted 2 hours. Catherine absorbed every detail with the focus of an operator preparing for combat. Guard schedules down to the minute, patrol patterns memorized with the precision of someone whose life would depend on being exactly where she needed to be, exactly when she needed to be there. Structural weaknesses identified and cataloged. Emergency protocols understood and planned for. By the time Shepard finished, Catherine had memorized the compound layout as thoroughly as she knew her own quarters. Could close her eyes and walk through it in her mind, visualizing every turn, every door, every window, every angle that could conceal a threat or provide an opportunity. The plan was simple. All good plans were simple. Complexity was the enemy of execution, and execution was everything. Insert via modified Black Hawk helicopter at remote landing zone, 12 kilometers from target. Approach on foot under cover of darkness, using terrain to mask movement. Breach compound at 0200 local time, when guard rotation left a 90-second window of vulnerability. Extract Falcon. Exfil to pickup point before dawn brought visibility that would make concealment impossible. Simple. Clean. 1,000 things that could go wrong, hidden beneath apparent simplicity. Any questions? Shepard asked. Catherine had dozens, but only one that mattered. When do we leave? Transport departs at 1800 tonight. You'll have approximately 12 hours to rest and prepare. I strongly suggest you use that time to sleep. You're no good to anyone exhausted. Catherine nodded, recognizing the wisdom even as her mind raced with everything that needed to be done. Everything that could go wrong. Everything she needed to prepare for. There are quarters in the East Wing, Shepard continued. Shower, sleep, eat. Your gear will be ready when you wake. As Catherine moved toward the door, Shepard's voice stopped her. Wraith, one more thing, she turned back. I'm glad you're on this mission. Falcon couldn't ask for a better guardian angel. Catherine met his gaze, seeing something in them that looked like respect mixed with concern. I failed him once. I won't fail him again. The quarters were sparse, functional, military efficiency stripped of comfort or personality. A bunk, a locker, a small bathroom with water pressure that felt like luxury after years of base housing. Catherine showered, washing away the residue of her old life, preparing herself mentally for what came next. The water was hot, almost too hot, but she welcomed the slight sting. It kept her grounded, kept her present, kept her from getting lost in the memories of Mosul that threatened to overwhelm her. When she emerged, she found her tactical gear laid out on the bunk. Black fatigues, body armor, load-bearing vest with ammunition, medical supplies, communications equipment. Each item examined, verified, secured with methodical precision. Her modified Glock went into its holster, riding on her thigh where muscle memory would find it without conscious thought. Extra magazines distributed according to a pattern she developed over 9 deployments, balanced for weight and accessibility. Combat knives secured at her back, angled for a cross-draw that would clear the sheath in under half a second. She should sleep. Shepard was right about that. Fatigue killed operators as surely as bullets, and she needed to be sharp for what was coming. But sleep felt impossible. Her mind was too active, too full of plans and contingencies and memories that wouldn't stop replaying. So instead, she sat on the edge of the bunk and pulled out the things that mattered. Victor's compass from Desert Storm, Hartwell's challenge coin with Falcon's name engraved on it, a photo from 2019, before Mosul, showing her team smiling in the harsh light of an Afghan sun. Falcon was there in the photo, young and strong and alive, his arm around her shoulders in the casual way of people who trusted each other with their lives. She traced his face with her finger, memorizing features she'd thought lost forever. "I'm coming, brother," she whispered to the image. "Hold on just a little longer." At 1700 hours, there was a knock at her door. "Come in." Colonel James Hartwell entered, carrying a small wooden box, the kind used for presenting military decorations. "Senior Chief, may I have a moment?" "Of course, sir." Hartwell sat in the room's single chair, the box resting on his knees. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied her face with eyes that had witnessed too many farewells. "I didn't authorize this operation," he said finally. "Chain of command is unclear. The people running this show, they don't answer to me." "I know, sir." "Your file access triggered something. Multiple agencies pinged. Security protocols I've never seen activated." He paused. "I don't know who's really behind this mission. I don't know if I can trust them. But you trust me." "I do, which is why I'm giving you this." He opened the box. Inside was a challenge coin, but different from the one he'd given her before. This one was older, worn, carrying the weight of history. "This belonged to your father, Brigadier General Thomas Morrison. He gave it to me the night before his last mission in 1987. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to his daughter when she was old enough to understand what it meant." Catherine's breath caught. She took the coin with trembling hands, seeing her father's name engraved on one side and a simple inscription on the other. "Service before self." "He knew," she whispered. "He knew the mission was dangerous, knew the odds weren't good, but he went anyway because that's what warriors do. We serve even when it costs us everything." Hartwell stood, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "Come back, Catherine. These kids need you. The Army needs you. And I need to see that my old friend's daughter inherited more than his courage. That she inherited his wisdom about when to fight and when to walk away." "I'll come back, sir. I promise." "Good, because I have an instructor position waiting for you when you do." After he left, Catherine held both challenge coins, feeling the weight of legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Her father's sacrifice in service of others. Hartwell's faith in her ability to honor that sacrifice. Victor's compass pointing toward home. All of it converging on this moment, this mission, this chance to prove that leaving people behind wasn't failure, just a pause on a road that always led back to redemption. At 17:45, she made her way to the helicopter pad. The modified Black Hawk sat waiting, rotors beginning their lazy rotation, building toward the power needed to lift them into hostile skies. Nomad and Echo were already aboard, checking equipment with the methodical precision of operators who knew that survival depended on preparation. They nodded as she climbed in. Professional acknowledgement between warriors who understood what was coming. Shepard appeared at the last moment, but instead of boarding, he stood at the door. "Change of plans, Wraith. I won't be commanding from the bird." His expression was unreadable. Someone else requested that honor. A figure emerged from the operations building, female, silver hair visible under her flight helmet, moving with the confident stride of someone who'd spent decades in command. Brigadier General Diana Webb, Falcon's mother. She climbed into the pilot's seat without a word, her hands moving across controls with practiced ease. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just a rescue operation. This was a mother going after her son. "General Webb will take you to the LZ," Shepard said. "After that, you're on your own. But she'll be waiting at the extraction point. Nobody gets left behind on her watch." The rotors spun faster, building to takeoff speed. Through the open door, Catherine could see Fort Bragg spreading below. The base where her secret had been revealed, where her past had caught up with her present, where everything had changed. Somewhere down there, Riley was working her shift. Madison was training. Tyler was fighting his demons. And all of them believed she would come back. She couldn't let them down. The helicopter lifted off, climbing into the darkening sky. Below, the lights of Fort Bragg grew smaller, fading into the distance as they headed toward hostile territory and uncertain outcomes. Catherine closed her eyes, feeling the familiar vibration of the aircraft, the rush of air through the open door, the weight of equipment on her body, all of it achingly familiar, All of it carrying her back to the person she'd been before Mosul, before the injury, before the guilt, before 4 years of hiding in the shadows of a life half lived. She pulled out Victor's compass, feeling its weight in her palm. Always find your way home. The helicopter banked hard, heading east into the gathering darkness, toward Syria, toward danger, toward a man who'd been waiting 4 years for rescue, toward redemption or death. Either way, Catherine Morrison was finally going back to war. But this time, she was bringing her brother home. 12 hours later, in the pre-dawn darkness of the Syria-Iraq border, 4 shadows moved through the compound with lethal precision. The rescue operation would be flawless. Every guard eliminated silently, every door breached without alarm, every second of the 90-second window used with maximum efficiency. And when Catherine Morrison finally found Marcus Webb in a cell that stank of despair and defiance, when she cut his restraints and whispered, "Easy days are over, Falcon. Time to come home," his first words would be exactly what she'd carried in her heart for 4 years. "Took you long enough, Wraith." They would make it to the extraction point with 30 seconds to spare. Diana Webb would fly them out under a hail of gunfire that shattered the Black Hawk's windscreen, but never touched her hands on the controls. And as Fort Bragg appeared on the horizon in the light of a new day, Catherine would look at the man she thought lost forever, scarred but unbroken, changed but still whole, and understand something her father had known all along. Warriors don't measure success in medals or missions. They measure it in the people they bring home. The compass had guided her through the darkness, and finally, she'd found her way back.